We're back live on the big mountain.
Hey, great to have you back on the mountain Wednesday night. Time for another live episode. Got a lot of good stuff planned. I know I'm going to be talking Boise State and UNLV, the two teams that made the Mountain West Conference Championship game last year. I think you're going to be talking Wisconsin and Michigan State. So we're going to start with some of that spring ball stuff, just things we want to talk about. As those have been with our live shows, you know we like to talk some Big Ten Mountain West stuff because a lot of our other episodes seem to be focused on these lawsuits that are ongoing right now. So we like to keep these at least focused on what we most enjoy, and that's the Big Ten and Mountain West. And then we want to have a really nice discussion at the end about the House versus NCAA possible settlement. A lot of new reporting out on that. I know we talked about that last week, but we've had some new reporting, some new ideas that I know I want to talk with you about, get some opinions of some of our viewers as well. And just remember to drop some notes in the chat. Say hi to us. We love to know who's out there. As you see, we've done some things a little differently. Our awesome producer back here has given the list of topics for tonight. That's the order we're going to go in. What is that on ESPN? The two old guy, Wilbon, and what's his name? It's Pardon the Interruption. PTI. Yeah. We're almost there, Steve.
This is the Big Mountain Countdown.
The Big Mountain Countdown live on the mountain. So, hey, welcome to our viewers. Thank you guys for tuning in again. We might as well get right to it. Let me get our chats up here, Steve, so I can see what's going on. All right, I got it up.
You have top chat. You might have to select.
What's top chat?
All.
Oh, live chat.
There we go. Maybe. Yeah, we love doing these live episodes mostly because of the great comments. We have, some of our normal viewers. They're here every time, giving us their comments, giving us their questions. So we can't wait to see who joins us tonight. Let us know your questions. Let us know what you're thinking about. Let us know if we're crazy about our Big Ten and Boise teams and just what you want us to talk about.
Well, let's get into Boise. Are you ready? We'll go Boise first. The team that you and I are very high on with the Mountain West. Probably the best odds right now that we think to both win the Mountain West and, of course, maybe get into that special playoff spot for the G5. We think they have a legit shot to do that. So let's talk about them. So I want to first talk about coaching. I want to talk about that a little bit. A lot of turnover here in the coaching ranks. Talk a little bit about some transfers in and out, high level. And then I'm going to get into some of the spring game notes as well. So coaching, as we mentioned before, Dirk Cutter is back, or Cutter. I'm sorry, not Cooter. Cutter. Don't laugh, Steve.
Dirk Cutter.
Cutter is back to keep things moving on offense. I think it's kind of a stopgap type of thing from what I've been hearing. He's here for 1 year. They have named Nate Potter the offensive coordinator, probably looking to potentially transfer to him here in 2026 after this year. Great to have Dirk back here. I know he's a Bronco. It's just been phenomenal to have him back for a season. Stacy Cullins, as you well know, he's coming back to Boise. He is an assistant head coach and the special teams coordinator there.
Huge pickup for them, I think.
I mean, their coaching rank they're stacked here, man.
Stacy Collins, great recruiter in the Pacific Northwest, was at Penn State, real solid recruiter, really solid special teams coach.
So, just some turnover, but the guys they're bringing in, and, that's just how Boise rolls. They bring in coaches that know the program, have been there before, most likely. The depth there in Boise is phenomenal. I mean, they just have something special there at Boise State. A couple transfers out that I want to talk about. We talked about Deshaun Misa, the linebacker. Huge loss. I have not seen where he's transferring to yet. I mean, there's always a chance that he comes back. That'd be huge if he could. I'd say it's very unlikely. He is a stud linebacker. And C.J. Tiller, who we talked about last time, the news had just broke, one of the three of the quarterbacks, he's actually transferring, believe it or not, Steve, to Utah State.
Wow.
We can't go
merry-go-round.
We can't go an episode without talking about a Utah State quarterback for crying out loud. So two guys go out. Two guys come in, then two guys go out. Now they're getting C.J. Tiller in here to Utah State. So just a crazy merry-go-round there with Utah State, no doubt about it. Let's talk about some transfers in. We've got Jeremiah Irby, a cornerback from Cal. He'll be a starter. That was desperately needed. They have to shore up their pass defense there in Boise. They're getting Cam Camper, a wide receiver from Indiana. Could he help fill that hole of McAllister leaving? McAllister, a stud. We talked about him long ago when he left midseason or towards the end of the season. He did go to TCU. We thought that's what was going to happen. That is what happened. And they also bring in a junior college wide receiver. Chris Marshall has a massive, massive upside, but does have some off-field issues. He's been struggling with that. So we'll see what happens, but I like what they've done here with the receivers. The offense, not an issue at Boise. This is not an issue. The defense, yeah, a little bit of an issue. And of course, Malachi Nelson, which we've talked about a lot, coming over from USC at quarterback. So let's talk about some spring game notes. I see we have a couple people. Hi, Mr. Red, Timothy, Genetics. Thank you, guys. We'll get to some questions here in a minute, but I want to talk about spring game here real quick, and then some of the coach's statements, Danielson, about the spring game. So Madsen, who I'm very high on. We were both very impressed with him coming in last year when Green was injured. He was injured with an injury, only able to take some limited time here with the offense in spring ball, but he was able to get some reps and do some things in spring ball. That's great. I heard an interview with him right afterwards. He did say he tore his MCL and PCL. Nothing with the ACL, but did tear his MCL and PCL. Said he is on target right now with where he wanted to be with his discovery. He did say he was shooting to play spring ball, kind of knew that was very unlikely, but he's like, hey, I'm shooting for the stars. I'm going to give it my best, see what happens. He said he's about 85% right now, so things looking pretty good for him.
This is Madsen?
Madsen.
Yeah,
This
okay.
is Madsen. Yep. Stated that he knew they were going to bring some people in. I found that interesting. He's like, yeah, I kind of knew something was going to happen and people were going to be brought in. Obviously talking about Malachi Nelson. Cooter was Cutter. Why do I keep calling him Cooter? I think the Dukes of Hazzard. Isn't that what that was? The Dukes of Hazzard. Just a good old boy. Okay. Anyway, Cutter was fairly displeased from what I gathered out of, I listened to his press conference right afterwards. I kind of heard his displeasure with Malachi Nelson a little bit during kind of the spring. Has a ton to learn. He's just coming in, new playbook. Cutter's probably expecting the Boise quarterbacks that he has seen. This guy's new. So I would say give him a little bit of time. He has a strong arm, really strong arm, very accurate. We'll see how well he does. I've seen people saying both of these guys could be the starter. I've seen Madsen. I've seen Malachi Nelson. I'm going to put assuming he's fully healthy and good to go and do what he needs to do over the summer, I've got my money on Madsen right now. I think Malachi is the future, but I think the starter for right now, day one, I'm going to go with Madsen. He's just more of the known commodity in Boise. I think he's safer right now, knowing the playbook and all that kind of stuff.
And we talked about Madsen Malachi Nelson when the transfer was announced, that he was really raw at USC. He has all the talent in the world, was really raw. It took him some time to adjust to USC. So I think if you're a Boise fan, you want him to be the future, but maybe give him a little time to settle in.
Yeah, for sure, no doubt. And you're seeing that the pains of transferring from one organization to the other, especially quarterback who has to run the offense.
Yes.
He's got some learning to do there. Wide receiver Austin Bolt received a ton of praise for the spring game and just spring ball in general. He could see significant time. So, pulling in multiple players here to not only replace McAllister, but bolster their receiving core. Really happy to see with what they're doing here. Their tight end room is solid again. And the pass defense here, as I said, yes, they brought in Irby from Cal, but their pass defense is going to be the concern for me, for this team, for the entire year. Will it get by with most of the Mountain West programs? Yeah, probably it should and will. They're going to get tested in some of these games. They get both Washington State and Oregon State this year, which I'm super excited about. We were talking about that not too long ago. That's fantastic. They get a huge test week 2 in Oregon. Keep it close, please. Just keep it close. And, week 1, Georgia Southern, at Georgia Southern, you're talking late August down in Georgia. I don't want to go to Georgia in late August, so good luck, Broncos. Yeah. You better come out of there with a win, or you trip up week 1. You're Dunskies with where we think they could possibly be here. So we have high expectations for this team. Some of coach's statements, very excited, very optimistic. If you ever hear Danielson talk, just an upbeat guy. You gotta enjoy listening to him because he's so energetic. He's no Bill Belichick.
Yeah.
I just watched the roast of Tom Brady, and if you haven't seen that, you guys have to see it. It's unbelievable. Nikki, what's her name? Nikki
Glazer.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. But anyway, I'll get off topic. He actually stated he's seen a lot of growth with Nelson, but again, a long way to go there. The D had 5 straight 3-and-outs in their spring game. They had 5 sacks, 7 tackled for losses. So that's good. I mean, it's good to hear that their defense is getting in the backfield. And he also said they made sure everybody played. They wanted to make sure that there's film on every player so that when he sits down and the coaches sit down with them and talk about what do we want to see you do in the offseason? What do we want to see you do for fall? There's tape on every player so that they can learn from themselves. I thought that was fantastic. I'm assuming that's probably fairly normal for programs, but that stuck out to me as something that Coach said as well. It's one of the schools that you can get a lot out of in terms of media. They have a Bronco Network news or Bronco Network that does a lot of good stuff. So, some of the Mountain West schools, not as great. I mean, you see that with some of your Big Ten schools.
Yes.
Some schools have a great media presence, whether that's on Twitter or YouTube or X or whatever the heck it is. Some schools, I'm struggling to find crap on them right now. I mean, it's I don't know what's going on. Yeah. But anyway, so that's where I'm at with Boise State. What do we got? David Jurgensen, what does he say?
Super fan, David.
Super fan, yeah, super chat. Sorry to bring this up, but BSU, I think, would be a major player. Do BSU fans want a G5 playoff with an actual shot at a national champ or just a chance to land the single G5 spot in current setup?
How about both? Well, we talked about this on another episode. I think both of us were open to the G5 playoff as a separate thing.
Yeah.
And you can tell me if I'm wrong. I think that probably most G5 schools, especially Boise State fans, would still like that opportunity to play for the real national championship. Get in the game against the big boys. Do you agree with that?
I do. I think you're going to get, while the playoff is going to be fun, if the playoff is going to be fun, a G5 playoff would be fun. I think it would keep the viewers entertained.
Yep.
It would get great matchups that we would, as a G5 guy, I would love to see these champions of the different G5s go at each other. But I absolutely would take that single G5 spot in the current setup. You're getting that national presence. You're going to be all over the place. Whether you get killed or not, the build up to that would be huge.
Yep.
Play whoever you're going to play. Michigan, Ohio State, whoever the hell you're going to play. You're up there with the big boys. Yep. That's massive media presence. Just the build up alone. Forget the game. Just the build up alone would be huge.
And imagine if they pull an upset like they did against Oklahoma years ago in a New Year's Six bowl game. That's just a huge opportunity. So I think most G5 fans would probably be open to that playoff, but they don't want to close the door on a G5 team getting into the big playoff, be with the big boys.
Totally agree.
If I remember correctly, I think David Jorgensen might be a Nebraska fan.
Yes. That's why he loved our last show, because you were on Nebraska last year. Last week.
So Genetics has joined, and he asked about Boise State or UNLV to win the Mountain West. I think you and I both, we really like Boise State. I like Fresno as my second team. Who would you say is your second team other than Boise State this year?
Fresno's going to be tough. They've graduated some players. I haven't done my kind of spring ball episode or review of Fresno yet. UNLV, who we're going to get to later on, they've brought in some strong talent. I mean, Barry Odom he could build a serious threat there in southern Nevada. He's a couple steps away. Quarterback's going to be really interesting. I mean, I think Mayava just was amazing. Lightning in a bottle. I've actually seen some rumors that are saying he may be the surprise starter in USC next year.
I hear he's neck and neck. I mean, the other guy, I forget his name. He was so good in the bowl last year, but I'm hearing Maeva is keeping it close.
I mean, and so if that's true and that's the case, that tells you the player he is and what he was able to do in UNLV. And I'm going to get into some of the players that they got in. But for right now, genetics, who am I taking? I am taking Boise State to win the Mountain West. We'll do a whole preview episode. I'll go through all of that kind of jazz come July, August, whenever we're going to do that. My odds-on favorite right now absolutely is Boise State. And Genty's one of the top running backs in the entire country. I mean, if you look at his performance levels and things, he's like top 5 or 6. They have him top 5 or 6 in the entire college football here. So he's a special player. And I just there's too much to like on that Boise offense in the Mountain West. Yep. Too much to like about it.
And I agree with genetics here. He kind of laughed at you saying keeping it close against Oregon. That's going to be tough. You're high on Oregon this year. I know you're a Mountain West guy. You want your teams and Wyoming kept it real close last year against Texas. Yeah. Oregon's. We both think they're going to be a monster this year.
Yeah.
For me, if I'm a Boise fan, I want to see Boise put some points on the board against Oregon.
For sure.
Even if they lose, 60 to, if Oregon scores 60 points, if Boise can put some points on the board, get into double digits, get into, put 20 points on the board, 25 points on the board, something like that. I think that will show more. It's going to be really hard for that Boise defense to hold up against Oregon's offense. Yeah,
won't happen
if Oregon decides to put the pedal to the metal.
Yep. So couple things real quick. I want to get through a couple comments, and then we're going to go to Wisconsin first, I believe you said.
Yep.
So again, just thank you for David for throwing that super chat out there. We really appreciate it. I don't know if I said thank you. I know we talked about it, but thank you for doing that again. Really appreciate that. We have a Duck Spartan hater in the house where you can hate on the Spartans when we get to them here in a little while. Steven's with us again. Mr. Ed, is Boise playing BYU history now? For now, yeah, I would say it's pretty much history. And then, David is the Go Big Red. Yeah. So we remember he is our Nebraska guy. So I think we got through that. You ready to go to Wisconsin?
Yeah, I'll just say real quick, when we talked about Nebraska before, and I've been picking 2 teams a week that I talk about.
Yeah.
Nebraska, very high on them this year. Matt Rule, I think last year, just as a kind of a summary, their biggest problem was quarterback. Their quarterback, the guy they brought in from Georgia Tech, was an absolute turnover machine. He was a liability, and he really was. And you could pick that out from the first couple games, and it continued to be true. This year, I really think that they have that position under control, and I'm expecting big things for Nebraska. And I will say, I want to pat myself on the back on Maeva. First game we watched, like opening weekend, UNLV, and I'm like, Maeva needs to be the starter. He is dynamic. He is amazing. There's no question in my mind he needs to be the starter.
Night and day.
Yes.
Very impressive.
Okay, so moving on, Wisconsin. Let's talk about Wisconsin. On Wisconsin. So April 27th, they had a spring game for reporters. Okay. They're refurbishing their stadium. So they didn't have the normal spring game, but they did open up basically a spring practice scrimmage for their reporters, which was pretty cool. So you have Luke Fickell, second-year head coach. Last year, we talked about them a lot. Things didn't go the way we thought they were going to go. It was a rough season, mostly on offense. They had Tanner Mordecai they had brought in to be the quarterback. He was absolutely awful all season. They really couldn't. Wisconsin had been a power running team before Luke Fickell got there. He brings in a new offensive coordinator, a guy who's kind of an air raid style, but also wants to run the ball to kind of set up the pass. Well, they couldn't really do either last year. They finished 93rd in the country in points per game with 23.5 points a game. So they were just awful. And a big reason, honestly, was the quarterback position. I mean, that's kind of a broken record or recurring theme. Just like Nebraska with Wisconsin, if you don't have a good starting quarterback that can move the offense and you can count on to be dependable, you're not going to do much. So this year, it looks like they haven't named a starting quarterback yet, but it really looks like Tyler Van Dyke is going to be the starter.
Okay.
Through practice, all the reports are so far, and in the spring game, in the scrimmage, that he's just the most comfortable running the offense. He actually has it moving. He's not a turnover machine. So it looks like he's won the starting job, but they haven't named a starter. I think they're going to let that go into fall camp, probably because they don't want the other guy to transfer.
Right.
They don't want the other guy to transfer. And so that other guy, Braden Locke, he's still competing. He's neck and neck. Honestly, I think Wisconsin could probably do what they're trying to do on offense. Either one of these guys, Tyler Van Dyke or Braden Locke, both guys just comfortable running the offense. They don't make a lot of mistakes. They don't turn the ball over. You could see last year with Mordecai that as early as the spring game and the first couple games of the season, this dude was going to be a turnover machine, a liability, so to speak.
That is your word.
It is.
I got a question about liability. Okay. I'll let you keep going.
All right. So moving forward, running back position is the next thing I want to talk about.
Yep.
And again, we talked about in the past Wisconsin being a power running team. Luke Fickell comes in, and in general, his philosophy has always been run the ball, play good defense, see what you can do on offense. But he brought in, an offensive coordinator that runs a version of the air raid, but has a strong component of a running game. So they brought in Tywee Walker, came from Oklahoma. Okay, this dude is a power back. Let me give you his measurables.
Okay,
5'9", so he's not tall. No. Okay, 225 pounds. Yeah, at 5'9". So this dude is he's built. He's a power back, but he did actually show in this scrimmage some speed, shiftiness, elusiveness. But he's that guy that's going to be their power guy. Now to combine with him, they have Ches Malusi. He's their speed back. He's their home run hitter. He can turn the corner and get upfield. And really that's what they need in this. This offense is about putting the defense in positions. We talked about this with the Penn State offensive coordinator, Andy Kotelnicki, coming in from Kansas. Very similar offense, putting the defense in positions where they have to make choices. They're uncomfortable. Who do we cover? And that's really what this Wisconsin offense is built around. Last year, they just didn't have someone who could run that offense, who could actually make it work. But this year, solid quarterback, a really good 1-2 punch at running back. We'll see what happens there with the offense. I mean, they've got to improve. Last year, again, 93rd in the country. Yeah. Weren't quite as bad as Iowa. We talked about Iowa a few times. But they weren't a lot better either. Yeah. So the defense, Mike Tressel, defensive coordinator. Really, the defense wasn't bad last year. Their one area that they kind of struggled on, they had some problems with, was their linebacker core. Okay. They were okay up front. They were okay in the secondary, but they really needed some help at linebacker. They brought in 2 new linebacker transfers. Both of those guys are coming in and already inserting into the defense, flowing with the defense, and it looks pretty good under Mike Tressel. Now, you never know in a spring game or spring scrimmage because they're running so vanilla defenses. They're not blitzing. They're not doing anything like that. But the one area that looked a little rough on defense looks like it has improved. They've addressed that through the transfer portal, and it looks like it's improved. So, if they can get just a slight improvement, move up from 93rd in points to maybe in the top 60 or so, that could be huge for them. Last year I was really bullish. I think Luke Fickell is a good coach. I was really bullish on them, and they disappointed. So I'm trying not to get my hopes up too high this year, but I do have the arrow trending upward on Wisconsin. I think they have their quarterback situation. They don't have it decided, but I think they have two really good options.
Okay, you just had a nice little pun. You don't even know you said it.
What's that?
On Wisconsin.
On Wisconsin. I said it a few times. Yes,
yeah. Hey, so let's get into a couple questions that are talking some Big Ten stuff. So we got Chad Bracey on. Yo, how you doing? Doing well, he says. So Wilson was according to John Hawks, Wilson was the last good quarterback that Whiskey had. Yeah. And then David Jurgensen, who is our Nebraska guy, says, I wonder if Wisconsin is going to follow the way of NU and go. Sorry, we have a screen here and I struggle to see it.
Probably Nebraska,
and go the wrong way. The situation reminds me too much of Scott Frost and NU. Any comments there?
Yeah, I mean, so here's the thing with Scott Frost. My opinion with Scott Frost, the biggest issue for him, I don't think it was schematics as much as Scott Frost was not the right leader for Nebraska. From everything what I've heard, everyone assumed he was because he was the golden child, he was the great quarterback. But for a lot of the things I've heard, people don't want to go on record, but you hear these rumors of him not really working hard in recruiting. He was and again, this is a little salacious rumors, but being in the bar a little too much. When he would go on trips, he liked to go and have fun and visit the bars more than maybe he liked to visit recruits' houses and get recruits.
Priorities.
Yeah. So I honestly think Scott Frost's issue was a leadership issue. I don't think you see that with Luke Fickell. Luke Fickell, this dude lives, breathes, eats football. He believes it's like football and church. That's his whole life. Football, church, and family. Yeah. He is a tough guy. He was a state champion wrestler in the state of Ohio. Honestly, the guy is boring. Like you will not find him in the bar. He will be in the film room. And so I don't think you're going to have a leadership issue there. Yeah. Now, like Genetics mentioned, their line of scrimmage. Yeah. They play in the Big Ten. They've gone to a more finesse offense. Is that going to work in the Big Ten? We'll see. Those are schematic issues, but as far as a leadership issue, I don't think we're going to see that with Luke Fickell like we saw with Scott Frost. So, David Jorgensen says, you is correct about our boy Scott Frost. Yes. The dude, he wanted to be just kind of play and have fun, and you're not going to win in the Big Ten doing that.
So I want to ask, Genetics and John both asked us, and it was a question I was going to ask you.
Okay.
If, what do you feel? They're saying, will they struggle in the new Big Ten? What impact do you think that's going to have on Wisconsin in what is now, I guess, the new Big Ten? I haven't called it that before, but the way they're not doing divisions. And so what kind of impacts that? I would think it's going to be fairly substantial for them, but what do you think?
So what I'll say is I think all of those teams in the West, Wisconsin, Iowa, Nebraska, they really benefited from being in the Big Ten West. Mm-hmm. They're losing that benefit. Mm-hmm. Now, bringing in these new teams, USC, Oregon, they have high quality skill positions. Yeah. I don't know I don't know how that's going to affect the mix. The Big Ten's always been power football, strong up front, defensive line, offensive line. Every week is going to be physical. I think you'll still have some of that, but you're also, Oregon's bringing in big guns, on offense. We'll see what USC has in the future in the next couple of years. So, maybe that lessens the impact of being as physical as you had to be before.
Sure.
We'll see. Yeah. But overall, just not having the Big Ten West anymore, it basically makes our path harder to getting into the Big Ten championship game. Mm-hmm. Now, however, the expanded playoffs, a 12-team playoff where the Big Ten, could possibly get 4 teams in, you think, they still have a shot at that, but it's going to make it harder for all those teams out west.
Yeah.
And I'm not crapping on any of those teams because I love the style of football they play.
Sure.
It's just that before you had this imbalance with having Michigan and Ohio State and even Penn State in the same side of the conference, and now that imbalance has been taken away, and we added some new good teams. So it's going to be even harder for teams like Wisconsin and even Nebraska getting into that Big Ten championship.
Understood. Well, let's get back to the Mountain West, UNLV, if you're ready to do that. Ready. And then after that, we'll go back to Michigan State. So Barry Odom, I mentioned him earlier. He has a new contract. It was just announced. It'll run through 2028. So good on him. He deserves that. As we said, we know Jaden Maeva transferred to USC. So what are they doing about quarterback? Well, they brought in 2 FCS quarterbacks. I mentioned before from Holy Cross, Matthew Sluka, and then from Campbell, Haj Malik Williams. Look to, kind of fight each other out maybe for the starting role. They do bring Doug Broomfeld back, who was the starter last year. He started the season as a starter until he was injured. Maeva came in, and that was it. We saw what happened after that. So Broomfeld is still there. They also returned Cameron Friel as well. Some transfers in. Jarvis Ware, a cornerback from UCF and Missouri. He's a redshirt senior. He's reunited with Coach Odom from his time in Missouri. He's a 3-star recruit out of high school. And I think he'll make an immediate impact here at cornerback for the Rebels here at UNLV. They bring in a slew of other defensive backs. Jalen Cantalone from Texas, Malik Chavis from Arkansas, Ladarius Bishop from Arkansas. So they are trying to stack up their backfield here, the secondary here for the Rebels. They also bring in a 5-star prospect from Texas A&M, Tony Grimes, as a defensive back. And then a receiver from Texas, Casey Kane, who will probably look to try and play offside of Ricky White, who is phenomenal. I'll get to him in a minute, but don't sleep on him. Spring game, the defense won 64-53. I guess there wasn't any defense because 64-53. Williams, the quarterback from Campbell, threw 3 touchdowns on the day, so looking pretty good. Coach was excited overall about the work that was done on and off the field. He talked about everything that was done off the field over the spring as well. Was happy with the progress of the front 7 that they made on defense. And they've brought in some players, as I said. I just went through all kinds of D-backs here to try and address some of the issues that they've had on the secondary for UNLV. Specifically, they're looking to get longer. They want taller dudes back there to help break up some passes. I want to talk about Ricky White real quick. I mean, we've given a ton of love to Genty, a ton of love, and rightfully so. We've given a ton of love to Keene, quarterback at Fresno, and rightfully so. He's a great quarterback. Last year, we gave a ton of love to Jaden Mayava. The one guy I don't think we've given enough love to here on the mountain is Ricky White, the wide receiver for UNLV. The dude is he's a baller. And like I said, we got to give him more love. I'm going to give him a ton of love. They actually have him graded as one of the highest returning wide receivers for next year. So we talked about Genty coming in graded as one of the highest running backs. Ricky White's graded, I think, in one of them, the highest wide receiver coming back to UNLV. He did have some off-field issues, bounced around a little bit and all that kind of stuff. Played phenomenally last year. Again, he had Jaden throwing him the ball. So hopefully we can get, one of these guys, Sluco Williams, somebody to be able to get him the ball consistently. But he's a fantastic wide receiver there in UNLV. I think they will have another strong offense. As I've said before, that's the defense. When you get into those big games, outside of conference games, will they be able to hold up? I'm glad to see that they've strengthened their secondary because that really showed in the conference championship game. I mean, once Boise got going, UNLV just didn't have answers. I mean, Boise got going and they kept going, and UNLV couldn't stop them. Frankly, I see that happening again. I mean, nothing against UNLV. I think they're going to have a good season. I love Coach Odom. But Boise's a freight train here in this conference, and I don't see UNLV stopping them. I don't see Fresno stopping them. I think Fresno, unfortunately, just had too much turnover. Most of Fresno's success is going to be on the back of Mikey Keene, and as long as he stays healthy, and as long as X, Y, and Z, and he is a great quarterback, but I think it's putting far too much on one guy when Boise can spread some things out. I know I'm not going to talk about Fresno here. It was a Boise and UNLV night. But I think those are your top 3, for sure. Those are your top 3 teams. We'll get to Fresno here in the future. But, one of the teams that, quite frankly, I was surprised. I search around different areas and go on different podcasts and things and look for stuff. Not a whole lot out there right now about UNLV. A little disappointing. Of course, we know they play in Allegiant Stadium. So they're trying to build something there. Coach Odom's trying to build something there. We'll see how it goes. I'm pretty high on them, just not as high as I am on Boise right now for next year. So anything with that? What do we got?
Well, somewhat related, our super fan here, David Jorgensen, he says Vegas is turning into a sports town, all big new stadiums. Totally agree.
Yep.
I've been very happy to see, major, professional sports teams moving into Vegas. I think it made a lot of sense. And we talked about this on a couple of different episodes. I really think the Mountain West needs to leverage Las Vegas. I absolutely loved the Mountain West, the basketball tournament there, the arena that they were in, the floor, and just the crowd and everything that looked awesome. It's kind of like a jewel. I think that they can leverage, do more things, have their. I would base my headquarters out of there. And just use Las Vegas as a great opportunity to showcase your conference, and even going further, if we see some kind of a merger of the Pac and the Mountain West, base your conference out of Las Vegas. I understand, you want that traditional, the Pacific Coast and all that stuff, but Vegas is growing. Vegas is where it's at. And they can really leverage that to help their conference and get more exposure, get people to come there. I'm excited for the Mountain West and for Las Vegas and how that's going to look over the next 5-10 years.
For sure. And shout out to Austin Hoover, Gillenborg, the highest graded tight end in all of G5. I actually didn't see that. That's news to me right now. I am super excited to hear that. He is a fantastic tight end out of Wyoming. And yeah, a lot of things to like here. A lot of great individual players in the Mountain West. I talked about how poorly the drafting was for the Mountain West here this past year. But I'll tell you what, sky's the limit, assuming they stay here and graduate out of the Mountain West into a draft. There could be some mighty big drafts coming forward for the Mountain West with some of these players. We have some stud, specifically offensive talent in the Mountain West.
And that brings me back to something that we mentioned, I think, on the last weekly episode. I would love to see the Mountain West do a conference combine, a draft combine, a pro day, whatever you want to call it, in Vegas. I mean, how awesome would that be? You get all the best athletes of the Mountain West. You invite some scouts, whatever. Who doesn't want to go to Vegas? And we mentioned that in another episode. And I think that'd be a fantastic idea because the Mountain West has good players. I mean, here's the thing: they maybe not all their players were the 4 and 5 star guys coming out of college, unless maybe those players had a problem somewhere else, didn't fit in, didn't develop, and now are coming to the Mountain West. But there are good players, and a big, you talked about the players that didn't get drafted out of the Mountain West, and then they got signed up undrafted free agents.
Yep.
Part of the reason is exposure. Maybe they don't get the same exposure. I really think the Mountain West, and again, if they combine with the Pac, the remaining Pac-2, and form some kind of a new conference, you need to basically get more exposure. And I think leveraging Las Vegas, having a combine pro day there, putting your league offices there, just doing more stuff there could really help with that.
Well, we saw how, they've done it now, I don't know how many years, but the whole Mountain West basketball tournament.
It was fantastic.
Unbelievably awesome.
Yes.
So the other thing, since you brought up, and I know I did a lot on that last episode, but I mentioned Peasley. I don't think I'd mentioned Peasley got a mini camp invite, but he did.
Okay.
And I have to say this because he's a Poke guy.
Yeah.
He actually was signed now.
Okay.
So he got the invite now. He got signed by the Jets as well. So
Very
I wish
cool.
him the best. As I've said many times, he's a massive gamer.
Yes.
So I hope he does well there. I'm not a big New York Jet guy, but hey, I'm happy to see he's with some NFL team. So.
Yeah.
All right, we ready for the Spartans?
Yes. So I know we got some Beaver fans out there. So if you have to cover your ears for a few minutes, I totally understand. and just so you know, I am a Beaver believer. I'm going before the next season starts. I'm going to be getting that T-shirt, the Beaver Believer T-shirt. I think Oregon State and Washington State still have a great future. I hate what happened to them. I think that they can still be competitive and have a great future. And I know that the Oregon State fans and the Washington State fans are they're still hurting right now, trying to figure out what's going to be coming in the future. But we're also covering the Big Ten. We got to talk about Michigan State. So obviously, the big move, Jonathan Smith coming over from Oregon State to Michigan State. From the Michigan State perspective, I think obviously it's a great hire.
Yeah.
And you see that because obviously Oregon State didn't want to lose him.
Right.
So it's his first year coming in. All of the talk around practice has been the spring practice, and leading up to the spring game has been, how is the offensive line going to work?
Yeah.
Or his philosophy again is a run the ball, power offense, and play great defense. And mix in the pass. He has a modern offense as well.
Sure.
But all of that, it basically goes on the offensive line. There's been some questions. He did bring over his starting center, Tanner Miller from Oregon State. And all the reports I've heard so far have been that basically Tanner Miller is already the leader of the offensive line and possibly the leader of the offense. That he basically came in. Now it helps because he's coming in and playing for his coach.
Sure.
But he has grabbed the bull by the horns and has taken charge of that offensive line, and the other guys are following his lead. So I we'll see how that goes, but that's the report so far.
Okay.
I do want to talk about some other players they brought. Well, first of all, I know painful for our Beaver fans. Yeah. They bring in Aiden Childs from Oregon State. He's basically been installed as their starting quarterback. He knew when he was coming there. Everybody knew he was going to be the starting quarterback. Yeah. He has looked fantastic. Again, I understand, very painful for Oregon State fans, but he's looked fantastic. He's going to be the starter, and I'm expecting big things out of him.
Yeah.
Obviously, the Big Ten, it's a different conference. We'll see, but I think they've got their starting quarterback for the next couple of years locked in. But they also brought in Tommy Schuster from North Dakota. He was another transfer because, they had basically cleaned house. All the old Michigan State players left, so they had to bring in everybody. So Tommy Schuster, North Dakota, looks really comfortable in the spring game. He ran the offense, looked great. Looks like a guy who could come in and just plug and play with no drop off, really. JEH58 says they're the Michigan State Beavers, which I agree, and it's a total shame. It's just the way things are working right now, and I expect a lot of the same success that Oregon State had the last few years. Jonathan Smith had at Oregon State that he's going to have at Michigan State. So they got their starting quarterback locked in. They got their starting center locked in, who's taking control of the offense. They even have their backup. It looks like their backup quarterback locked in. Another player I want to talk about, freshman Nick Marsh. Okay, I'm a Penn State fan. This causes me some pain now. Nick Marsh was Penn State's #1 wide receiver target this year. Yeah. They were recruiting him. They were on him, and they need help at wide receiver. Yeah. Well, he went to Michigan State. Apparently, Michigan State made him an NIL offer he couldn't refuse. He was their main target. I think they put all their whole NIL bundle in one player. And it looks like so far that's paying off in camp and in the spring game. He looks like a game changer. They're moving him all around the field. He's super talented, great wide receiver, has speed, has every tool, honestly, that you want out of a wide receiver, which, again, causes me pain because I would love to see him on Penn State this year. But he looks like a guy they're going to want to – he may not be the starter. You could come in as a freshman. They got some other starting wide receivers, but they are going to use him this year. They're going to use him all over the field, in the slot, outside. They're going to be getting the ball in his hands because he's a special playmaker. I wish he'd went to Penn State instead. Yeah. But Nick Marsh, so, that combination, that Aiden Childs to Nick Marsh, that can be huge at Michigan State. So I tried to look into the defense. I couldn't really find a lot about the defense, but right now the D-line is a big question. I think he did. I believe Jonathan Smith, I think he was able to bring in maybe 1 or 2 transfers from Oregon State, but they also lost a big
Didn't he take the whole team?
He took quite a few players, yes.
I had to put that in there.
Yeah, but Michigan State also lost one of their best defensive linemen, transferred to another school. So right now, there's not a lot that I could find about the defense other than the defensive line is still a big question. Okay. And it sounds like the secondary should be very good. Maybe back to those Mark D'Antonio days of the no-fly zone. We'll see how that works out, but the secondary should be very good. Okay. I'm expecting good things there, but the D-line, they could be susceptible to getting run on. We'll see. I think that's probably your biggest question on defense this year. You got anything for me?
No.
Okay.
But I got a comment for Steven. Okay. A beaver with a Spartan helmet on. I am going to do my best to make up our own Spartan logo.
Okay.
For the fall. For everyone that knows, we pick games. Yes. And anytime you pick, maybe you will never pick them. I don't know. But when you pick the Spartans, I'm going to get our producer a special Spartan logo.
Oh, boy.
With a beaver head with a green Spartan helmet on top. If you allow it. It's up to you. You're the Big Ten guy. If you say no, we'll say no. But I think it's hilarious.
Yeah, and it is. I hate to rub any more sand in the eyes of our Beaver fans. Timothy Chapman says, the sad thing in the end, it was only about ego and money for Jonathan Smith, more ego. I mean, yeah, there's just an overall trend in college football of all the power, the money, the influence, the talent is moving towards the power two. Yeah, we talked about this. It's just the way it is. You and I have gone on record. We would love to see the old traditional regional conferences stay together, but that's not how things work right now. So, everything is moving towards those power teams. So He's going to Michigan State. He's going to a Big Ten team. He's making more money. He has more prestige. So you're right. It's about power and ego, and that's a lot of people. If you make more money, have more prestige, that's what a lot of people are willing to go do.
That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, I'm really anxious to see the quarterback situation there, Childs.
Yes.
I'm really anxious to see what he's going to do this season and his entire football career, or college football career. But I'm really excited to see what he does, not for the Beavers, but for him. And, where I think I'm in agreement with you. I think he could be a very, very strong starting quarterback in the Big Ten. And I'm anxious to see how that plays out here this next year. So with that, I have a couple quick transfer portal things. Okay. And then we're going to get into the wonderful House versus NCAA settlement, some new news on that. I also want to get into what it might mean for the G5, because as we know, this is all P5 related, P4, P5 related, some unionization talk, and just have more of a discussion as we get into that. But first, transfer portal with the Mountain West. Armani Winfield, wide receiver for Baylor, is now going to Colorado State. He's a 4-star recruit out of high school in Texas. Very big athletic receiver. Just what an air raid system needs with good old Fowler Nicolasi there in Colorado State. So anxious to see how Winfield does there with the Rams. San Diego State, a team we've talked about a lot just because there's so much turnover. So a lot of players leaving. Well, now you're seeing players being pulled in and them getting players. They get Jared Batty, for a linebacker from Illinois, 6'4", 255 sophomore, likely to make an immediate impact with the Aztecs. They get Ezekiel Larry, an edge rusher from Yale, 6'2", 240 pounds, and he has a massive football pedigree in terms of dad and uncles and all this kind of jazz. So again, another guy I see coming in and making an immediate impact. They brought in some O-line commitments, one from Arizona, one from Tennessee State. And they still have about 4 or 5 scholarships available there. So a lot of work still being done there in San Diego State. We'll see where things end up, but they are certainly trying to at least put a decent football program, football team on the field next year. And I think they will, but again, it's going to take some time. A lot of turnover there with that. It wasn't one of those whole Oregon State and Michigan State types of deals where you're pulling all these players. They're kind of building it almost from, I don't want to say from scratch, but they're pulling players to make a team there. So with that, are we ready to get into some of this wonderful settlement talk?
We got to talk about it.
We got to
do it. It's the main thing that's happening right now. We do a lot of videos for those who don't know. We started covering the Pac. That's probably how a lot of people found us originally.
Yeah.
And we've been covering the ACC lately with all their lawsuits.
Yeah.
It's important to. It would be much more fun if we could start talking about real football on the field again. Right. But this stuff, it's stuff we have to get to. We have to talk about.
And it's big stuff. I know we've done some standalone episodes on NLRB stuff, on NCAA cases and things like that. We haven't done a lot of these as standalone episodes, but we've been talking about them as part of our live episode. So I want to start talking about the Ross Dellinger article that was reported, I think it was the end of last week, regarding a settlement agreement. We did talk about some of this last week as well, but new information's coming out. Of course, it's going to be back and forth, so you're going to be seeing things change. But right now, he's saying the cost for each power school could be as much as $30 million a year. This consists of about $17 to $22 million for revenue distribution, cap for athletes, $2 million in back damages for all the NIL stuff that wasn't paid in the past, and as much as $10 million in additional scholarships for expansion of sports-specific roster sizes. The revenue sharing portion of the model is permissive and not required. Also, schools will have the discretion to expand scholarships or not, so they can pick or choose, I guess, take it or leave it. The revenue distribution, roughly 22% of athletic department revenue streams, so it includes ticket sales, media rights, contracts, sponsorships, but it does not include donations, Steve, which I found to be interesting. I understand why, but donations are some of the highest generators that we've seen for years now within major college athletics. So interesting that wasn't a part of their calculation. Roster limits here. Football, actually, they're saying football could be reduced just after the NCAA increased the limit from 110 to 120. So we'll see what happens there. In terms of the settlement, from what they're saying, the Big Ten is actually most aligned with getting this settlement done, getting this lawsuit settled. Let's move on. One administrator apparently stated that if one conference settles, then we're all going to have to settle. That would make sense. Kind of once that rock starts rolling down the hill, you better get on it or you're going to get freaking run over by it. So apparently some want a lower number than that 17 to 22 million. Again, we're still in negotiations. We don't know what it's going to be. And I know Texas A&M recently, and you're seeing this with a lot of schools, but specifically Texas A&M laid off over a dozen staff last month in order to start to try and free up some dollars for maybe what this future model might look like there. So
I will say with the Texas A&M, that's kind of being portrayed that way. But one part of that is they got a new athletic director from Nebraska. I forget his name now off the top of my head, but he went to Texas A&M. And so part of it is about this, but also part of it is they want to align and move more money towards the NIL front and less internal operations. So I think it has something to do with this, but maybe not as much as Ross Dellinger and some other people are
well, whether it's this model or another model, they're starting. You're starting to see them, kind of shuffle the shells. They're moving the shells around in the shell game. The timing of this, they're saying, could be fall of 25, maybe 26, depending on how things shake out. And just to be clear, this is totally separate from that NLRB. I always struggle with that NLRB case with USC and the PAC and the NCAA, where athletes could be deemed employees, and any other NLRB case that you're seeing. I mean, we talk about Dartmouth and some of these other things that are ongoing. There's all kinds of crazy stuff going on. So anything with the settlement, Steve, and then I want to get into maybe a little bit more discussion on some of these other items.
So I have two major thoughts from this. First, it doesn't surprise me the Big Ten is leading the charge on this. Going all the way back to the previous commissioner, Kevin Warren, I had heard a lot of rumblings that the Big Ten was looking to possibly increase or eliminate scholarship limits because they felt that was an antitrust violation. And, and that was something that was going to hurt them, and they had the money that they could increase. So I'd heard they wanted to do that. They were also probably the first conference to talk about actually start to engage with some players discussing revenue sharing. So they were already kind of taking the lead on some of these things. And it doesn't surprise me. They signed the biggest media contract in college football or college sports history. So they had some extra money and they wanted to protect themselves from antitrust suits. And, they have this extra money. Let's share it. Let's spread it around. So it doesn't surprise me that they're kind of leading the charge. But one thing, a lot of people are talking about the settlement details, like this is going to establish the new rules that are in place. I would pump the brakes on that.
Yeah.
Because even with these new rules, there's going to be a lot of these new rules will continue to be antitrust violations potentially, and they would need an exemption from Congress for that. And then you have the labor piece. It's fine. They're coming up with a settlement for past players, and those past players, their representatives might come to this agreement and agree. Okay, yeah, we're going to get some revenue share, whatever. But future employees or future players may still want to pursue that employment angle. And we've talked about this before. You may see different things happen in different states. You may see differences between the public universities and the private universities. So it's even if they come to a settlement here, I think the Power Five and the NCAA are trying to use this as a way of, okay, we're going to settle our back liabilities, and we're also going to try and use this as a way to get some things that we want. But I don't know how effective that's going to be because there's still so many moving parts. So we'll see how that goes. Those are my two major thoughts on that.
Yep, I agree. So I want to talk about the G5 because a lot of this is about the power conferences and what are they going to do. And I found this this quote from Kessler, who is the plaintiff attorney for this case. And he was on a panel at Howard University.
Right.
And I'm going to read his quote verbatim, and then I want to get your take on it. And then I have a graph from the newest Ross Dellinger article that I think came out today or yesterday. I think it was today. And we'll get that put up here in a minute. But let me say what he says on this, and I want to get your thoughts because I'm torn on his comments here. So he says, you have to think about power schools differently. The reason we get tied in knots is because we conflate those schools who have developed these gigantic independent commercial businesses with the schools who are still just educational institutions with extracurricular activities. When you try to come up with one rule for all, you go crazy. You have to look at schools differently. For the ones with the money, there is plenty of money to compensate the athletes and share it with women's sports. So I struggled reading that a little bit. I want to get your take, and then I'll see if I agree or disagree.
So I understand where he's going, and he's right. We're going to show this chart. I think our producer's trying to put it up now, or it is up. Okay. And you can see the massive difference. Ohio State here with what is it, over 200?
180. You don't know exactly,
Yeah.
but I'm
Close to
guesstimating
200
about
million.
180 million
Right.
for Ohio State on the one side, and then you got 15 million,
Yeah.
give or take,
For
on
Houston.
Houston on the other side. So you see the dramatic difference in Power 5 schools.
So there's obviously a big difference, and the question becomes, where do you draw the line? Okay, do you just separate the Power 2, the Power 4, the A5 or A4? Do you let schools choose? I think the NCAA framework set up let schools choose, opt in or opt out in participating. In my opinion, we're actually starting to see a market take place and basically self-select. Okay, the richest schools are gravitating towards the Power 2, and then you have everybody else. The new CFP rules, and some people talk about a Power 4. I've been very clear on this for a while. I believe it's a Power 2 and everybody else. And you're going to see schools, in the Big 12, in the ACC, and in the remaining pack that want to stay on that level. They want to because
Sure.
it's the traditions of college football that we grew up with, that we all love. But financially, they're just not going to be able to anymore. You're going to see that gap widen and widen. We're seeing self-selection. So to me, and that's why you have the Big Ten leading. I'm sure the SEC would be on board with a lot of these different things. So we're starting to see that self-selection where the Power 2 are getting more and more money, and everyone else is falling behind. And I think, and we talked about this, we may see like 2 or 3 division, like subgroups within Division 1.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, you're really starting to see that separation. And that's where it makes sense to me to have a delineation between the types of rules, what they're doing, what they're not doing. But again, it gets complicated because of antitrust.
Right.
If they agree to a set of rules and things
Right.
like that. So I understand what he's saying. I think he makes some good points. He kind of goes in a weird roundabout way, but he's absolutely on the right track, I think, as far as there is a huge difference. Ohio State can afford to do a lot more things than a G5 school, a Houston who just moved up. They can financially support programs. They're just on in two different worlds right now.
But I guess with the chart, and the reason I wanted to get the chart up is just the dramatic differences within P5 schools.
Yes.
Like, so let's forget, I know I prefaced this with the G5, bringing them into this, but even when you look at the P5, you've got your massive halves on the far left, you've got a huge middle ground, and then you call them your have-nots, if you will, and I'm generalizing on that. But then I get back to his comments about, you have some that are just educational institutions with extracurricular activities. That's what they all are. And I get it. I know what you're saying, but at the core of them, they're all extracurricular activities. That's what they are.
Well, that's what we think they should be, and maybe what they first were intended, but it's become something, we've talked about this so many times, they are multi-billion-dollar enterprises now. The revenue they generate, the economic, not just the revenue that like, these schools, Penn State, Ohio State, Texas, Florida, Georgia, they are the economic drivers in their states. So they really, we want it to be that way. We want it to be simple like it always was, but unfortunately, it's not that simple anymore. That's just not the reality. Can we bring up that chart on our screen real quick?
Oh,
I wanted
sorry.
to just because you were talking about, you can see a huge difference in the power. And so what I'll say is when you look at this chart, and we're going to bring it back up.
Or
here.
slightly delayed.
Yeah, slight little delay. So this chart is going off of, if I remember, it's going off of data from a few years ago. And so you do see that dramatic difference. However, a lot of these schools now, so we have now USC, UCLA, Oregon, Washington moving
Right.
towards the Power 2.
Right.
We have, so yes, there is kind of a line, but I think right now on that chart we see just kind of a slope because it's the remnants of the revenue under a P5 model.
Sure,
Okay.
right, yeah.
As we go more and more towards this P2 model, I think you will see you'll see a group here and then a drop off.
Okay.
It will start to, the market is kind of self-selecting there. So if you do this graph over the next 10 years, as these teams gravitate towards the P2, I think you'll start to see a much bigger break and a much bigger gap.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess we'll find out. Maybe that's a 2030 episode.
Yeah. Well, and just, I mean, the amount of revenue, the Big Ten they're projected with their current contracts to pay out up to $100 million a year over the next few years to their, whereas I think the Big 12 is in the 35 million range, and maybe the ACC as well. I mean, that's a huge right there. Yeah. That's just huge. I mean, it's almost triple.
Okay. Is it kind of like the New York Yankees?
Yeah, I mean, well, so, and that's the thing is, you know, we on one hand, we want to keep college football the traditional way, where the NCAA created this level playing field. Well, the Supreme Court has said that the way the NCAA created the level playing field is not acceptable anymore. It's antitrust violation. So, you know, in baseball, they don't have a salary cap; they have a luxury tax. But if you compare it to the NFL, there's a lot of parity. Yeah. And why do they have parity in the NFL? Because they have free agency, so the problem is college football right now has some parts, they have free agency, but they don't have a salary cap. And so I think eventually we're going to see some kind of collective bargaining agreement where each of the programs can only spend a certain amount of money. And there will be give and take. The players will get things that they want. The schools will get things that they want. And that's when we'll see a system which kind of sounds like more of a semi-pro system, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I'm thinking. It's absolute, not kind of, Steve.
Yeah.
Excuse me, not kind of.
Right.
It is a semi-pro
It is,
system.
and that is what is coming. You know, that is what we've been seeing this little by little. Where, you know, this is a train that's been coming down the tracks for years, and I don't think there's nothing going to stop it at this point. Unless Congress get involved.
So speaking of that, I'm going to get to just released, I think it was today or yesterday, the wonderful Ball Act. I don't know if you saw this Ball Act yet. Have you seen this letter from, it was from Congressman Fry
I did
and
see
more?
It, yes.
So we'll get to that in a second. That'll be our ending. That'll be our grand finale.
And I'll have an interesting stat for you on that
Okay.
I saw today.
Well, I just want to comment on Timothy Chapman. And he's saying, we're going to have the same schools playing for the same stupid championship. It's going to get boring, and that could absolutely happen. But I have to do a shout out to one of my favoriteest movies that I love to watch. I'm not a baseball guy. I find baseball boring. But Moneyball.
Oh, yes.
Fantastic movie. And, well, I totally get what you're saying there, Timothy. I totally get it. And by and large, you could see that, you know, kind of just the churn of the top, whatever you want to call it, 10 to 20 or whatever it's going to be. You could see that churn. I also think that, especially at the collegiate level, I hope that once we get some of this ironed out, that, okay, the NIL piece is figured out, the employment piece is figured out, the antitrust is figured out. You know, it's been a long time coming, as we've talked about. We'll get it all figured out. But we'll get back to the fact that certain kids, certain athletes want to go to a program and be in that program and grow within that program and not just jump around for 4 straight years. I think we could, once this settles down, yes, you're still going to have potentially the transfer portal, so you'll still have that for kids. But I think there's the potential that this will ease a little bit and we can get back to not the old ways of them not being paid to play in NIL, not that, but get back to the fact that I'm a Bronco and I'm going to be a Bronco for 4 years. You know, I think we can, and that's still there. It's, you know, we all want to talk about these transfers and the big names. That's the headlights. That's what we get on podcasts to talk. Everybody's talking about. But you still have a ton of these kids that they're at a place, unless something goes wrong or they don't get the opportunity. And I think these kids should have a chance to get an opportunity somewhere. We've talked about that up and down of the transfer portal. So I think there's a lot of good to that. And I think once some of this stuff gets settled, you know, and we can settle down a little bit, I hope it's not as dramatic as what you're saying there, Timothy. And there was a chance I could throw Moneyball out. It's one of my favorite movies, so I want to throw it out there.
Well, and I'll, you know, we're in, I think, the 4th year of the transfer portal. We've had 4 years of it, and just basically a year and a half of, you know, loosening restrictions on the transfer portal.
Yeah.
One trend we're starting to see this year is what they're calling boomerang transfers, and there was a really famous case, Caden Proctor. Okay, he signed at Alabama. He's from Iowa. He went and signed at Alabama. He goes up to Iowa, went there, was there for the spring, and ends up back at Alabama, realizing for whatever reason he wanted to be at Alabama. And you see other players doing this. They start at a school, they transfer for greener pastures. It's not always what they, thought it was going to be, and they come back to their first school. So I think you're starting to see some of that happen where players are realizing that, the grass isn't greener on the other side.
Sure.
But I think to get to where you're talking about, I think we will have to have some kind of level playing field again.
Yes.
Whether that is Congress intervening and reinstating the power or exempting the power of the NCAA,
Right.
or whether that is through some kind of collective bargaining agreement,
Right.
which unfortunately is going to make the sport look more like or be a semi-pro or minor league professional league, and not the old college football that we were used to back in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, and so let's get to unionization. The last thing I want to talk about, and then I do want to talk about that proposal, I guess, from the Ball Act. So unionization. So UAB became the first D1 football team to sign with athletes.org last week, one of the several different unions that are out there. And this athletes.org has signed over 3,000 athletes since their inception in August. Jason Stahl, who's the director of another one of these organizations, the College Football Players Association, is wary of any settlement that provides future legal protections for the NCAA without bargaining.
Yes.
If there isn't bargaining, or if there isn't antitrust legislation from Congress, they can't achieve such protections.
Yes.
And I found that really, now of course it's coming from an organizer, a union organizer, but I think he's spot on. Like, because this is being billed a little bit in settlement, it's going to ease these lawsuits. It'll give us I'm going to use a word you like, bridge,
Yes.
to get to someplace else. And I'm like, no, it's not. All this other crap's still going to be. I mean, will it ease it maybe for a year or something? Okay, maybe, but it's not answering any of these other questions.
And that gets back to my point I made earlier, where I said the NCAA and the P2 the power conferences, the power schools are trying to use this. They should be focused on trying to fix a past problem,
Right.
But they're trying to use this as a method to fix a future problem. And I don't think it's going to be effective. It's not going to work because there's not collective bargaining. There still is not an antitrust exemption.
So with that, let's get into this from Congressman Russell Fry and also from Barry Moore, one from South Carolina, one from Alabama. They're introducing this Protect the Benefits of Athletes and Limit Liability. Shockingly, that spells ball.
Yeah.
The Ball Act. And so I'll read over some of this. The legislation addresses the onslaught of litigation universities and conferences face relating to student athletes' ability to receive compensation based on their name, image, and likeness. This language provides a legal safe harbor for universities, conferences, and the NCAA to allow them to provide new benefits for student athletes, establish and enforce rules, and comply with the law without constant risk of costly litigation. Student athletes deserve compensation for the use of their name, image, and likeness, and the Protect the Ball Act is intended to accompany broader legislation establishing a national framework that secures student athletes' right to receive compensation and sets a federal standard with guardrails in place. So this is just happened. This was dated the 8th. Is that right? The 8th. So just dated today. Just came out today, Steve. This is hot off the press.
Yeah.
I know you keep saying that it's a I don't even want to say long shot. I think you say it's not going to happen. But I give this guy an A for effort.
I'm not too impressed by these balls. I'll say that.
All right.
So here's the thing. I have an interesting stat for you.
Okay.
And this
You said you had an interesting stat.
and I saw this. I'm stealing it from someone. I can't remember who because I didn't know we were going to talk about this.
Yeah, this is an audible.
Yeah. So I saw this stat on Twitter. Someone had shared this. One of the reporters that I follow, College Football Reporter, and I can't remember who it was. I'll try and figure it out and put a comment in.
Okay.
But there has been, in this term of Congress, there has been 15 new acts proposed
Oh, gosh.
to help regulate college football.
Okay.
Guess how many have even made it out of committee? So the committee is the first step so that it can go. Remember the how to become a bill?
Yes.
We used to have
I'm
that
just
shirt.
a bill sitting on Capitol Hill. I'm assuming you're going to say 0.
0 out of 15 in the entire term of Congress.
All right.
There's been all this. I hate to pop your balls here,
But it's the Ball Act.
you're right, exactly. But
Protecting the ball.
protecting the ball.
And it's about football. It's not about men balls.
Yeah, okay.
Man balls.
All right. Either way, I'm not impressed. In Congress, I think there's 440 representatives or 454, something like that. And this is two of them that have come up with this together. They still need to get 200 and some more on board. And let's talk about it if they get it out of committee. How about that?
Well. Also, Ross says that the narrowly focused bill was birthed from Judiciary Chair Jim Jordan, who holds antitrust jurisdiction. Steve.
Yeah, he's the chair of the Judiciary Committee. I don't know.
Yeah, you don't like it. Well, I thought it was interesting.
It's not that I don't like it. I honestly, if I had my dream scenario, we talked about this. Make me king for a day.
Okay.
And I would create a law that basically gave an exemption for the NCAA, took us back to regional conferences, and helped the players in some way, gave them some kind of a stipend or whatever, allowed them to make some kind of money in some way, but still have a level playing field. I would love to do that. I just have no faith in Congress whatsoever. They have enough other problems, and I think anybody who's putting their eggs in that basket is setting themselves up for failure.
You've said that a couple times.
Yes.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah.
I want to get back to the architect. He says CSU to the PAC ? We say, well, I say, and I think you'll agree with me. Yes, if 11 other schools go with them,
Or maybe 10
or maybe 10.
on my,
Yeah, maybe 10. So one school from the Mountain West, or even a few schools from the Mountain West to the PAC. The Big Mountain says very unlikely. The Big Mountain thinks it's all or nothing, whether it's to the PAC or to the Mountain West, TBD. JY says to the Mountain West, but Steve says it doesn't matter.
No.
So yeah, we would say kinda, but not just CSU or not just 2 or 3. I saw someone the other day saying Boise, Fresno, and who was it? It was Boise, Fresno, and San Diego State, done deal. And I went, you're bloviating on absolutely zero intelligence.
Yeah. So because I haven't seen the architect comment. Is he one of our regular comments?
I'm not sure.
So I'm going to give him a quick summary of my
Yes.
vision. Okay. So I believe that the Mountain West and the PAC are going to merge together and create either just a new conference or a rebranded conference. So we can call that a sideways merger, backwards merger, reverse, forward, whatever. They're going to come together, and because there's such an opportunity there to come together and create what would be the premier West Coast conference.
Yeah.
I believe it's inevitable. We're going to start to see the first steps of that play out this year with Oregon State, Washington State playing, basically a Mountain West schedule. I think it makes a lot of sense for them, and I totally understand Oregon State and Washington State. They're leaders. They are doing their fiduciary duty to the school to see is there any opportunity for for some kind of entry into the Big 12, the ACC, the Big 10, whatever. What they look at as a power conference. To me, I just don't see that happening. If it was going to happen, I think it would have happened already.
Yeah.
And it just makes so much sense for them to come together, to combine. My one school, I will say this, and I can't remember if I've talked about this, that I would, if I was merging, and I have my trepidations about Hawaii because they're football only, and because of the distance and all that. I think that's the one. I think everybody else comes along. That's the one where I could see them being left out, and they would have to have some kind of a payout or something.
Yeah,
to make
I don't
that
think
happen.
they're doing that.
We'll see. That's the one. Other than that, I don't see the PAC cherry picking the Mountain West.
No.
I think it's pretty much all. Although I could see Hawaii getting left out.
So PAC West, baby, says Josh. Good to have you back, Josh. And yes, but I think the PAC West is a D2 or D3
Yeah,
conference,
we figured it.
and we can just buy the freaking name.
Yeah. What I like? The Mountain PAC.
I think PAC West is better than Mountain PAC.
Oh, I like the Mountain PAC.
But
We should trademark that just in case.
We could do that. You know what's funny though? I was on a message board
Yeah.
somewhere. I don't remember what the hell I was doing. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be the premier, like we've been saying. We said it, I don't know how many times. The premier Western half of the country conference.
Yep.
And somebody responded, isn't that the Mountain West right now?
Yeah.
And I went, huh, yeah, it is. So I'm going to beat my Mountain West drum. I know we've got some Beav fans on right now, so forgive me. But I'm going to say Beavs and Cougs join the premier West Coast, or not West Coast, Western half of the country conference, the Mountain West.
Yeah, I think by default it is. But
Right. That was, they were saying it kind of in jest,
Yes.
like, well, the Pac is basically dead
Right.
for right now. Aren't they the only? And I'm like, yeah, they kind of are the only one left. So they are the premier. Now we want to make them even more premier. Our idea is to make them double premier by pulling in the Beavs and Cougs.
And so I have one last comment for the architect and also JEH58. And I know JEH is a Beaver fan. And so what I've been pretty clear on is I think it's the Power 2 and everybody else. And so I really think if Washington State, Oregon State, Mountain West come together, they have that position, those great California markets. They're in Las Vegas, great time zones. They have a lot of value to network and media partners. I think that really puts them in a position where once the ACC collapses and whatever happens to the Big 12, it would put a Mountain Pac or whatever you want to call them, a combined conference there in a fantastic position to be competing to be the best of the rest kind of thing.
And I'm going to say, I thought JEH was cussing at the Big 12. Which is allowed on our show.
The freaking Big 12.
Yeah, you can cuss at him, but he apparently he was shifting when he was trying to type his numbers. Or maybe it was the caps lock. I'm not sure. Yeah. But anyway, you can cuss at the Big 12 all you want around here. And yes, agree. Little to no interest. They would have done it by now. The ACC will only happen if they're in desperation mode to gain whoever the hell they can.
They want to do like a
and they want to, which do the Beavs and Cougs really want that at that point? I would think not, but I don't know. And then I also say to Josh, screw Cal and Stanford. Who needs them? We'll keep Fresno and Boise. Make it the Pac West. We'll have the Beavs and Cougs, and they can, let Stanford go independent, like I've seen somebody say. Screw them. And Cal, nobody wants them anyway. That's why they're in the frickin' ACC. They're in the Atlantic Coast Conference, and they're on the frickin' Pacific Coast. It makes no sense.
Cal and Stanford have wine taste on a beer budget.
And it's stupidness. But anyway, I'm getting happy. It's probably time to end this because I'll say things I don't really mean. And we're getting JEH and Josh. You guys are getting me going on this. And that's why we have fun sometimes when we get going on this stuff. So with that, hey, we've been going for over an hour. We appreciate our mountain dwellers. That's what I'm calling our viewers, our mountain dwellers, for sticking with us here for an hour and whatever it's been, 15, 20 minutes. We thank you guys for watching. We have an episode coming out tomorrow on Clemson and the ACC. We have an episode coming out Friday on FSU and the ACC because there's tons of stuff.
Salacious.
Tons of stuff happening there. And and of course we stay on the Big Ten and Mountain West. Wednesday night is our Big Ten Mountain West night, at least, if not more. And of course, as we get into football season, we're picking all these games. So that's what we're going to be doing around here. So hey, with that, and we got Steven Diego. He agrees with Josh on Cal and Stanford. Okay, I think we just say screw them. That's where I'm at. Screw. That's where we're going to end it. Screw Cal and Stanford. That's where everybody's at.
They got no balls.
All right. So with that, hey, we thank you guys for watching. We'll see you guys next time on The Big Mountain.